Hello, and welcome to today's Savings Network webinar. Today's topic, responding to clients' later needs. We'll get started in a second or two, but we're just waiting for people to join us. So settle in, grab a coffee, and take a seat. Hello, and welcome to today's Savings Network webinar. Today's topic, responding to clients' later needs. My name is Laura Yepes, and I'm a Senior Program Associate with the Savings and Financial Capability team. Thank you for joining today's webinar. This is the last in a series of 3 webinars covering the now, soon, and later savings model. Like many of you, Prosperity Now staff are fully remote, so bear with us if we experience any technical difficulties. Getting the most out of today's call. We invite you to join from a quiet space, grab a coffee or a snack and settle in. Engage, send us your questions and comments as you listen. Tweet with us on Twitter using the hashtag ProsperityNow. And also reflect on ways to apply what you learned today to your own work. Prosperity Now's mission is to ensure everyone in this country has a clear path to financial stability, wealth, and prosperity. This webinar is being recorded and will be mailed to registrants and available within 1 week on our website. All webinar attendees are muted to ensure sound quality. You can ask a question or share thoughts at any time by typing in the text box of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you experience any technical issues, email gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. We're so excited to have you all joining today's webinar. To start, we'd like to begin with a word from our sponsor. Please welcome Paula D'Ambrosa from Prudential Financial.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Paula D'Ambrosa. I'm from Prudential Financial. Thank you all so much for taking your time out of your busy schedules to join us today for a conversation around really building an environment to support savings for low to moderate income households. Over the past couple months, we have held smaller group roundtables exploring how the savings priorities have shifted over the past year and the changes that could make it easier for households to build savings. Today, we plan to build off these conversations with 2 guest speakers who participated in the roundtables. Our speakers will discuss their experiences delivering savings programs in their communities and which programmatic, institutional, and systems change that they would like to see happen to support savings. Thank you all so much for all the work you do to support savings and financial security more broadly in your communities and across the country. Really exciting for today's conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Paula. My name is Parker Cohen. I'm the Director of Savings and Financial Capability at Prosperity Now. And, Paula, thank you for those remarks. And thank you again for yours and Prudential's generous support for so much of Prosperity Now's work. So today we're going to be taking a step back and reflecting on where we've been around supporting savings in low and moderate income communities. And as Paula said, how to envision a future where it's easier for people to save and build assets. So we're going to center the conversation, as Paula noted, around a series of savings roundtables that we recently completed with practitioners across the country. So this webinar is very much in the mode of a coffee chat. So like Laura said, sit back, relax, reflect on what you're hearing from the panelists we'll talk to, and think about what this means for savings programs, savings policy, and other changes that may not be directly tied to things like, let's say, a savings account, but can have a big impact on supporting individuals in low to moderate income households around savings. So on the next slide, we have the agenda. So we're right now I'm setting the context a little bit, and then we'll go into speaker introductions in just a second. And then I'll do some more context setting around the all-in-one savings continuum and how Prosperity Now really sees the need for flexible savings solutions. We'll then follow that with an overview of what some high-level learnings that we had from the Savings Roundtable series. And then we'll speak with two practitioners who attended the roundtables about what changes they would like to see to make building savings easier, as well as how they've adapted their work to the current environment. We'll then open it up for audience Q&A and then discuss next steps, wrap up, and close. So on the next slide, you have myself and my colleague Laura, who you just heard from. And thank you, Laura, for leading this webinar series, and she'll be leading the conversation with our guest speakers in just a minute. And so on the next slide, we have our two guest speakers. So we have Lourdes from the Financial Literacy Coalition of Central Texas, as well as Kadira from the Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation. So Lourdes and Kadira are two expert practitioners who support not just savings in their communities, but financial well-being more broadly. And they're going to bring that holistic lens to our conversation today. So we're really excited and thankful to have them, and it's going to be a really wonderful, robust conversation. So looking forward to that. And so on the next slide, I'm going to talk through a little bit about this all-in-one savings continuum, just to ground our conversation. And I'll move through these fairly quickly for those that are a little bit more familiar and have joined our webinars in the past. So on the next slide, we have the now, soon, and later savings continuum. This is a framework that we put together a couple of years ago that really illustrates how we view savings and the different ways that people need to be able to save to build financial stability, security, and ultimately prosperity. So we have on here the need to manage immediate expenses and be able to have savings for now needs, for income shortfalls or expense spikes, the emergencies that come up just as daily life. And then we have, soon the need to be able to save for short to medium term goals. So this could be, saving for a vacation, saving up for expected expenses like Christmas presents at the end of the year. And then later is the final stage in the continuum, is the need to be able to save for long-term goals such as retirement or your children's college or post-secondary education. And what's really important here in this continuum is that people need to be and are always saving for different purposes at the same time. And they need to be able to move between these purposes flexibly so that when an immediate need comes up, they aren't having to mortgage their future or go into troublesome debt, and that there are products available that allow folks to be able to move seamlessly along this continuum. And so that's what we're really looking for, and what we've been engaging credit unions and nonprofit practitioners and other product developers around in exploring how we can get all of these features within one product. So on the next slide, we have an overview, and you can, when we send these slides, you can click on this link and go to the resources page. But we've conducted a landscape analysis series that explores the existing solutions that are available for low to moderate income households around savings. So we analyzed the products that are available, the features that those products use to encourage savings, the experience that customers have when using these products, how delivery partners such as nonprofit practitioners can be engaged to bring products to consumers who need them, and also really looked at what are the gaps in the marketplace in all of these topics, and where could more holistic savings solutions fill that gap. So please look out for those resources. And on the next slide, this is bringing us kind of into the current moment that we live in, unfortunately. And we have, just to ground this conversation, we've done some analysis on the unequal impact of COVID-19 on household financial stability. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we really looked at how those that work in low-wage occupations and have less in savings and liquid assets were particularly vulnerable heading into this crisis. And I think what we've really seen is those that were vulnerable, that we were working with in communities across the country before the crisis, were the ones that unfortunately and tragically have faced the brunt of the pandemic's health and financial impacts. And on the next slide, there's another illustration of this. We did a survey last fall looking at who or how vulnerable households are navigating the financial impact. So, unsurprisingly, half of the households we surveyed, but still shockingly so, half the households we surveyed were unable to fully cover at least one basic expense during the pandemic. And 40% of lower income households felt worse off financially as a result of the pandemic. And Latinos, Black, and lowest income households were most likely to use credit products that could increase their financial vulnerability over time. So, I think a theme we're seeing here is that, while, many vulnerable households, really have suffered significantly and very greatly during the pandemic, the experiences that people are facing are quite diverse, and really depend on the job you held before the pandemic, access to federal and state supports to help weather the financial crisis, and many other intersections that individuals have. And so that's something we'll dig into a little bit more today. So this brings us up to the present day. We had these wonderful virtual savings roundtables. We brought together in 2 different series, about 20 practitioners from across the country. And on the next slide, the objectives for these roundtables are really to dig in a little bit more to what we were seeing in that data that we just presented. So looking at how have savings needs, priorities, and barriers shifted over the past year, and understand then in response, how have savings programs and products been adapted to meet this shifting need and the new reality that many people are facing. And then we also worked in these roundtables to generate solutions for the future to support savings as we continue through this crisis. And so on the next slide, you have some of the key takeaways that we identified. So really unsurprisingly, there are major barriers of savings that were identified in the work that we'd done before this and the work of our partners across the country. Major barriers to savings, persisted and in many cases grew. That said, clients engaged around savings are in very different places. So, on the one end, we've got clients in low to moderate income communities who have suffered really grave financial consequences, maybe unemployed, unable to access benefits that they should be entitled to, have not been able to get the stimulus payments, et cetera. And on the other hand, you have those that have been able to maintain employment or gain new employment, are able to manage expenses, are receiving benefits or the stimulus, and have been able to increase savings. And some of these folks are looking at building their savings, looking at new savings products that can support their goals. But that said, there's still the barriers that existed before are still remain. Difficulty managing expenses can reduce the prospect for current and future savings. The issues around public benefits remain, and the fear of losing those critical benefits if you save too much. We know that the COVID crisis has led, and the roundtables really showed that the COVID crisis has led to a realignment of many savings programs. So most programs were able to adapt to meet emergency savings needs, and many have supported clients through cash transfers to really help people in that day-to-day who have really struggled to make ends meet and perhaps are suffering material deprivation. For again, I mentioned this continuum, or these, that the clients are in very different places. Savings dropped off for many, and in some cases, those that are in a position to are really looking to replenish that savings. There's a concern about the recovery of clients' financial status, especially for those who are older, unable to access benefits, programs have noticed low morale in clients around their finances, which is, it's a very sad reality, but not surprising in the least. And clients are looking and needing cash infusions to restart savings. So, and then we also, really talked about, if you could wave a magic wand and change things today, what would it look like? What new policies would you create? And so people were, all over the map here in generating wonderful ideas. And these, ranged from, small tweaks to policies, such as taking away asset limits on public benefits, to major sweeping changes like universal basic income, where people can have are guaranteed to have a certain amount of money to help really create a baseline financial stability, which would make it easier for those folks then to be able to build savings through the wages they receive from their jobs. So a lot of great ideas, which we'll dig into more in a minute with our expert panel. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura to lead us in that discussion. Laura?
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. We're now turning over to our guest speakers, but before we move on to today's panel, I want to remind you all that this is a group discussion, but all webinar attendees are muted at the end, are muted to ensure sound quality. So please ask questions or share your comments by typing in the question text box on the control panel. The session is being recorded, just as a reminder. And I want to welcome our guests. Today with us, we have Lourdes G. Zuniga, the Executive Director of the Financial Literacy Coalition of Central Texas, and Kadira Abdur-Rahman. She's a financial counselor at Bedford Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation. Both of these speakers were with us through each of the roundtables. So Kadira had the chance to attend our February roundtables, and Lourdes had the chance to attend our March roundtables. We're so grateful to have them here today to talk with us about their experience at the roundtables, but also to share their insights and what they're still thinking about, what they've gone back with and sat with. And we're just very happy to have them. So with that, I'll start the conversation off by asking Lourdes first, how does your organization support clients in their savings journey?
Thank you, Laura. Can you all hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you to Prosperity Now and everyone in the team to create these spaces. My name is Lourdes Zuniga. I'm the Executive Director at the Financial Literacy Coalition of Central Texas. And, you know, our organization focuses on strategies that support asset building. We partner with Save Our Life, another nonprofit, a national nonprofit, and we created this. We just launched this savings match initiative to incentivize people to save for emergencies through COVID. But even before then, people started to realize, you know, and understand the importance of having emergency savings. But I believe, you know, before it was Hurricane Katrina, and now with the pandemic, I think people have learned the importance of savings, and the crisis with COVID-19 has shown the many barriers that our low-income communities face to stay afloat through the crisis. And so we're focusing now on assisting them in building their financial safety net and to have some plan financial savings aside, so whenever another emergency arises.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you for the great work you guys do in Central Texas. I think it's really vital to have these community-based organizations in a place really helping and learning from their clients to inform what their clients need. Next, we have Kadira. Kadira, how does your organization support clients in their savings journey?
Hi everyone, I'm Kadira Abdur-Rahman. I'm a financial counselor at Bedford Stuyvesant Restoration. And just like Lourdes's company, we also focus on asset building. We focus on helping clients in the Brooklyn, New York neighborhood, and we offer one-to-one mentoring, as well as programs with Savers Life as well, just like her company. And we also have certified financial planners who can help clients kind of help with asset allocation, so helping clients put their money where it's supposed to be, allocating every dollar for an intention, and that's really how we help clients with their savings journey. We also meet with clients multiple times just to make sure that they are reaching their goals. So if their goal is to save for, you know, something more of like the now, so like a car, then we help them and we work with them from start to finish. We meet them where they are and we help them until they get to that goal. Or if their goal is to help them save for like a later aspect, like retirement or college, we set them up with a certified financial planner with Bedford Stuyvesant Restoration, and we help them get to that goal. So we pretty much focus on the asset building part of financial counseling, and also just a lot of one-to-one mentoring to help each client reach their savings goals.
Awesome. Again, thank you both for joining. We're so glad to have you here. Both of your organizations do great work in your communities, and let's get started with sharing what we learned from the savings roundtables. And tell us a little bit about your experience at the savings roundtables, and what was your major takeaway from the roundtables? We can start with Kadira.
Yes, so I participated in Savings Roundtable 1, and we realized that a lot of the barriers for savings stemmed around like high expenses, low income, stress or mental health, or just simple willpower. We also discussed predatory lending and I guess the need to, have material things stops a lot of people in the low income uh, part of the world from saving. So the discussion ultimately led to solutions and ways in which we can overcome these obstacles to saving. And first, we all said that, it's really important for clients to have the education around how important it is to save. If you kind of tell a client that they need to save with no real reason or intention behind the saving, it kind of goes into one ear and out the other. So ultimately, the education around saving and why it's important was one of the solutions to the barriers that we came up with during Savings Roundtable 1. But we also ultimately said that, people do need to realize that they should treat savings like a bill, like it's mandatory. And the second solution was just that, treating savings as it was something that they had to do, just like they would have to pay like their phone bill or their rent. So in the Savings 1 roundtable, we ultimately came up with those two things as like the main solutions to helping with saving. I would also add that we kind of realized that, you can save as much as you want, but it is important for like, neighborhood communities and nonprofits to help the community as well, which is what we're doing at Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration. And it's also important for like city agencies to help out the clients in the community. So we kind of came up with some solutions for that as well.
And Kadira, your roundtable was about a month ago. Is there something you're still thinking about, ruminating about, a question that's still in your mind?
I would say I'm still thinking about how low income communities can save for the later aspect that Cohen mentioned, because I'm trying to just really wrap my mind around like something realistic that a lot of people don't have access to, which is like a retirement plan, because most retirement plans are connected to like your job, right? Like your job helps you set that up. But what about the low income communities who don't have jobs? How do they set up retirement? So I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, important and vital questions to ask, right? How do we help the lowest income earners still think ahead in the savings continuum while meeting their emergency needs? Which something we had discussed a little bit about in your roundtable. But let's move to Lourdes now. Lourdes, share with us your experience attending the savings virtual roundtables and what was your major takeaway?
Well, in addition to what Kadira has shared, I think for us it was very similar. I think my takeaway, it's more around systemic issues. As we know, our systems are designed in many ways to keep people living in poverty. And as service providers, we can advise people to save, but if systems that embrace asset limits, for example, penalize people for saving or jeopardize the very little they have, rather than encourage them to be prosper and to save, then that's a flawed system, right? It's a policy issue that we need to change. I also think that the role of financial institutions in building trust with communities of color, immigrant communities, and underbanked communities, it's also important. It's not just to sell them products or services, it's to build trust, because in many ways they feel like it's all transactional. And so I think centering those services around trust and community needs is important in order to move forward. The challenge for financial institutions now that COVID-19 has put some added barriers. Like for now we have branches that are closed, and that means we have to be creative in order to engage with low-income communities through that lack of digital access or language barriers. And so all that adds up to the already overwhelmed system that lacks of engagement because we have not been able to reach the communities in the language that they can understand or in a way that they can engage them actively. So how do we help them navigate the system? For the immigrant community with different languages, not just Hispanics, how do we engage them and how do we help them navigate that system? So we need to really think about the policies in place that we have and how do we protect our community from predatory lending or from falling farther behind into poverty. So I think that the challenge with COVID is to help in low-income households to stabilize their finances and then put them on a path to recovery for them to achieve financial stability. So in my opinion, and my hope is that, we learn something from this pandemic. We can reinvent the financial industry so we can create a financial ecosystem where we have products and services that are designed based on community needs rather than having them, with high interest or high fees that a lot of our communities can't afford. And that's the reason they have not explored those financial systems. And that can only be achieved by bringing all voices to the table and finding solutions that are long-term and that don't just address the short-term, but also take care of the short-term needs and then addresses the long-term, which is, the reason we're here.
Yeah, Lourdes, I think you're totally on point. COVID has changed the way that we think about client needs, has changed the way that we deliver services. And more than that, it's helped us learn that we need to adapt our programs to meet client needs. So I think you're right on point. Is there anything about the roundtable discussion that you're still thinking about, that you're still pondering?
That's a great question. There's a lot of things that I think about every day, and more so after our roundtable. But I think that a couple of questions that I still have is just how do we create more coordinated efforts with different stakeholders and sectors and bring them all to the table, so we don't just work on like isolated issues or as isolated entities. And I think that there is a value in having a coordinated and collaborative effort so we don't duplicate services, so we don't duplicate efforts. And then the other thing that I think about is how do we develop, now that we're talking about these fintech products, but I think what the missing component is that we're developing all these products, but we're not really creating infrastructure and the access for people to use those products and services. So I think that it would be very interesting for us to all come together and think about how do we build this access and the infrastructure for people to trust the fintech and be able to use it and access those services. Financial issues are not isolated from each other, they go hand in hand. So how do we provide services to help people build their savings, but at the same time, how do we address the high levels of debt that most people have right now? So when you address that, you're building credit, and that in the long run is going to help people access to acquire assets and pass generational wealth. So it's not just the savings component, it's like the reduction of debt and how do we make that connection and it feels more organic. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think knowing your org and knowing how you guys have had to pivot from COVID and learning for what your clients needed and pivoting to adjust those needs, how do you see savings needs changing in your community overall due to COVID? And how do you see the field moving forward with the learnings that you're taking away?
Well, I think for a number of people that really COVID has not changed much. They still have the steady income, if not more. I think that for them, prioritizing the need to continue having a savings mentality and practicing that for in a way to plan for the future, right? But I think that for frontline workers and a big percentage of the community who has faced income volatility, it's harder to prioritize that because now they their priorities are basic needs and how do they cover their healthcare needs. And if they've been impacted directly by COVID, it's another additional expense. So I think that for them, it's harder for us to, tell them like you have to save, because they're thinking about how do I put food on the table? How do I pay my rent? I don't want to be evicted. So I think that the way it has changed is that I think that we need to stabilize, that big percentage of the community that has been affected dramatically, and then work with them on how to build their savings once we stabilize their income. And then the other thing I think is more the role of the government and then philanthropy. I think it's important that we bring those systems into this equation. And I think government now, what we learned is that through the government initiatives and the stimulus package, there was a huge percentage of people that have been left out of the stimulus because, their status and, even being married to someone that does not have the status did not receive this stimulus. So I think that, in that case, I certainly appreciate the role of philanthropy in our region. They step up and help the community that were left out, and even stakeholders at a municipal level, like council in our cities here in this region, created some like the RISE funding. We were able to assist people that did not qualify for the stimulus. So I think it's important to highlight the role of government and philanthropy in this endeavor, because as service providers, the nonprofit usually is the one that picks up the slack of several systems that are so flawed. And I think if we're going to tackle this problem, it's not just going to have to fall on the shoulders of the nonprofit and the service providers. It has to come, with some type of government assistance and philanthropy, and all together help our communities get to a better place. So that's, the importance of filling the gaps, but all in a collaborative way, more than just isolated institutions.
I think you're so right, Lourdes. So on point about a lot of the ways that nonprofits kind of cover the holes that government policy systems and structures leave behind. And I think that's something that we all as a field need to confront and learn from, especially in light of COVID, and move forward with. So let's turn to Kadira and ask the same question. How have you seen savings needs change in your community due to COVID? And how do you see the field moving forward with these learnings from COVID?
Yes, so I definitely agree with everything that was said. I think, COVID has changed people's mindsets on how to save and probably what to save for. I think that instead of people prioritizing debt repayment, they're focusing on emergency savings, realizing that that's probably something that they should do at the same time. So it's not a matter of, should I pay my debt or should I save? It's a matter of, a little bit of both if possible. I think though that it's really difficult to see the field moving forward knowing this, because people will probably now, like Lourdes said, have to, limit the amount of assets they have or hide the amount of assets they have in regards to savings in order to benefit from city and government programs at the same time, as well as savings, because we know that these programs penalize you when you have over a certain amount. So I see people hiding their assets. I see people hiding their savings moving forward, which I think is so unfortunate, because we should definitely award people for saving when necessary. But I also think that COVID has affected what people save for, and a lot of COVID people, a lot of what happened during COVID is that people experienced, death. People had to come up with money to save for funerals, and these are just emergency expenses that are coming out of nowhere. So I think moving forward, people will probably be more prepared to have some type of emergency savings started. And again, they'll probably just moving forward try to hide some of that, which I can't blame them, because if they're being penalized for having money, then it's they have the knowledge to know that it's more important than debt repayment during this time, honestly. And so I think people will just move a lot smarter with their money when they have it. But it's also, that question of, reaping the benefits of government stimulus that other people that didn't get, and just making sure that their money is put away with the right intentions.
Yeah, Kadira, I think you're hitting on a lot of really important points, especially around flexible savings account and the way that we see savings work right now. A lot of people have told us that they wish savings was a lot easier for them, that they wish that the way that they saved was more like automatic. It was more easy to um, deposit funds. We've heard from a lot of people in our past webinars as well. I remember Anne Leland Clark from Prepare and Prosper saying that why shouldn't we award people or reward people for making withdrawals to use the money to like not get debt or not get into loans the same way that we reward people for depositing the money into a savings account. And I think those are super interesting ideas that we kind of started to ruminate about in the savings roundtable in regards to what kind of flexible savings solutions are needed for your community. So I think my next question really is like, what kinds of savings solutions, flexible savings solutions, did you remember thinking about in the roundtables, and why do you think they're important for your community?
Yeah.
Kadira, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the best well, number one, I think it's important to have flexible saving solutions, because as I mentioned earlier, everyone doesn't have the same situation. I know, like, for a lot of people who are unemployed, they don't really have the option to start saving for retirement because they're not employed. Then you also have, like, you know, healthcare that's connected to employment, and for those that are not employed, they have to fit within the box to fit into, I guess, Medicaid. And if they have any assets that takes them out of that box, then they're screwed with healthcare. So it's just like, savings should be flexible, because it literally affects almost every aspect of your life when it comes to you know, applying for anything. And the limits that they put on savings, it's just not fair. It's almost like they know and they expect people to remain in poverty. So if it's like, if you earn this amount of money a year and you never made over that amount, they're actually expecting you to not have a dollar saved. But then once you do save, they're penalizing you for it. So I think flexible saving solutions are important to have. There's some people who live in public housing who have, you know, a lot of money saved, and they're penalized for that, and they shouldn't be. So that's why it's important. I also think, you know, we do have different aspects in different cities, and so saving in one city might be different than saving in like another. So like I mentioned before, I always bring this up, but like New York compared to like somewhere in the Midwest, it's not the same. We have different expenses, and so there should be some types of, you know, saving solutions surrounded by your area and where and how that area operates financially. And I think that's really the main importance. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Kadira. And I think Lourdes, we'll turn to you with the same question. What do you remember thinking about flexible saving solutions, or which ones did you remember thinking about during the roundtables? And why is it important for your community to have access to them?
You know, it's interesting, and I fully agree with Kadira. You know, there is, I think, the importance of having the flexibility, but also making it easier on people. I think that the financial sector, unfortunately, you know, we have a very antiquated way of looking at these issues. I think our legislation has not been updated, at least not in this region, as far as, you know, asset limits. So I think that we tend to look at this with a very narrow lens, and we make a lot of assumptions about poverty and people that live in poverty. So having a flexibility to decide what's best for your household, it's important. And I think that everyone has different priorities, and beyond COVID, I mean, there are other emergencies that people have that if you make it so narrow that you can't use your savings because it's for a college fund, and then you have someone that is ill and needs health care, and so how do you balance that? I think that first, I think that it's important because we need to have some flexibility in our savings initiatives. But also beyond the pandemic, there are like the potential of so many other emergencies. Here in Texas, we just went through a major winter storm, and just to give an example, people were having savings, but at the same time, I heard from different clients that they said, I had to spend all my savings that I put for retirement into home repairs because here the winter storm, we weren't ready for it. It's not something that happens here in Texas, so everybody's pipes were bursting right and left in pretty much the entire state. So here we are having everyone spending their savings and fixing their house in home repairs. And that's a clear example of how you never know what life is going to throw at you. And so having the flexibility to spend your savings on the things that you need, I think, is the importance of savings, not necessarily why you're saving. I think it's important, but it's not the most crucial aspect. And so we realize that having a community that's already being challenged by so many factors, and adding that restriction to their savings is a detriment to the entire savings initiative. So I think that it's important to consider having a goal for savings, and I agree with that, but I also think that it has to be flexible enough for people to be able to address not only their basic needs, but also the unexpected needs that they might have in the future.
I completely agree, Lourdes. I think you're right on point with all that. Just a reminder to the audience that we will be transitioning to Q&A shortly, so get your questions ready, send us comments through the chat. And let's move on to our next question. So thinking about how we move forward with the field, what questions do you feel like we need to center into our work as the field continues to think about savings, the savings continuum, flexible saving solutions, and creating solutions to remove barriers to savings? And we can start with Lourdes.
Well, my first question, I think, would be, in addition to the ones that I posed earlier, I think it's how can we update our legislation? Our asset limits here in Texas are probably haven't been updated since the 80s. So I think it's something that I often think that is something that we must do right away. Our asset limits is probably the worst in the country. It's only $1,000. And so I think that that's a question I have for our policymakers, is that when are we going to take a stand against poverty and update those and lift them? That's a barrier, a huge barrier to our community. And Texas especially is a prosperous state. So I think that the wealth has to be shared with everyone. And then the other thing is, I really emphasize in the role of fintech. I think that with the booming of this, the technology, I think that it also comes to regulation. So how can we regulate fintechs and make sure that people have access and the infrastructure is there? I know there's legislation about broadband, access to broadband. So I think that that's definitely a good start, and also bringing philanthropy and government into this equation is important. And I think that would be the question: what is it that we can do together? And I guess for me is thinking about collaboration, because there's not one solution that is going to erase all the issues we have. I think that the question is, how do we come together and address this many barriers that we often have to face in order to just stay afloat. So those are my questions.
Awesome, great questions. I invite everybody in the audience to also send us the questions that you're thinking about throughout this conversation. And Kadira, the same question for you. What questions do we need to center in our work as a field to continue to move forward with flexible saving solutions to remove barriers, etc.?
Yeah, my first question would be the same. It would be directed towards policymakers. How can the government help? I think that as I mentioned numerous times, it's really important to have financial education. It's really important to have these nonprofits help with asset building, asset allocation. And we can do this every day with different people, but it may not solve the major big issue, which is poverty and remaining in poverty. It's almost like a cycle of poverty, rather, where, you know, low-income communities, they can get a sum of money, or they can start making more money, and then something is thrown at them to put them back down again. So my main question will be directed towards policymakers. How can the government help? How can they, you know, partner and collaborate with nonprofits to provide more solutions? And I would also ask, what exactly will they help towards? I think reparations are definitely needed, and communities that help build this country and help build such a wealthy country, and then they're not benefiting from the wealth, and they're still struggling generations and generations later. So my main question would be, what can the government do to help with the wealth distribution in low-income communities? And also, what incentives can they give for people to start having these emergency savings? It can't just be, you know, the 1% with all of the money for eternity. So that would be my main question.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think you guys posed like really interesting questions, and I think it makes us think about not just the future of like how we do savings with clients, but also how we want the field to move, right? Like there's things that we're hoping the field can learn from COVID and take with them. For example, the virtual environment and being able to do calls virtually afterwards. I think that's really cool. And there's other things in the past webinars that people have brought up, but in the roundtables, I felt like a lot of the focus was really on solutions, and it was solution oriented, and that like always makes us think that there's still hope, you know, to be able to come up with these solutions that remove barriers for people to be able to actually save. So thank you guys for that. I'm gonna open up the floor for Q&A. So just a reminder for Q&A, feel free to ask the speakers any questions in the chat box. Also, add your reflections, ideas for the conversation. This is our time to discuss and share. It is a group discussion, but attendees are muted, so please ensure that you're typing your questions into the question box. And yeah, we got one question in right now, so let's see. For both of you, any ideas about how to track and reward savings for match savings programs in a way that will not have detrimental effects for asset limits in government programs? And either one of you can take that one.
So yeah, thinking about the question, it's definitely difficult, because if you are a person that qualifies for some type of, you know, food help or rent assistance, it is likely that city and government programs, they're going to ask you, how much money do you have saved? Do you have any stocks? Do you have any bonds? Do you have any assets such as a home? Things of that sort. And as you say yes to all of those things, your qualification for those benefits starts to go down. So it's definitely difficult. The only idea that I would even have in mind is to pretty much split savings amongst different saving vehicles. So maybe like putting some savings in different types of savings accounts, and that way your eggs are not all in one basket. But it definitely will honestly probably take some type of like hiding of information, which is like, I feel so bad saying, but it's the reality and the truth for a person with lower income to benefit from public programs and benefit from and reward themselves for saving.
Yeah, and I think that it's also, important to, I think we have this idea of, you know, um, as Kadira was sharing, some of the people, hiding their assets, and I could not blame them either. But we always have to think about the future and what that looks like. For some of our immigrant populations, the public charge and all that takes into account not just the public benefits. And so we always advise people to be truthful, because that can be a consequence in the future. And we've seen cases where you lie about one thing, or not disclose one thing, and then it comes up later on naturalization, in the process, that people really dig into what you've done and what you said, and how truthful that was. So we always try to encourage people to disclose what they have to the best of their abilities, and because again, they can be a big consequence in the future. And unfortunately, that's the reason I talk about systemic change, because if we didn't have those policies in place, we wouldn't have to hide anything, and we wouldn't have to be fearful of disclosing our assets. So I agree with Clear. There is no it's a difficult situation to be in, but like she said, I think that just having different outlets where you can rely on is probably the best way to do it.
Thank you both for sharing that. I think we got one more question, which was, I think someone said that Parker mentioned the magic wand question, and they're asking what that meant. What we did in what one of the activities in the savings roundtable was we told everybody they had a magic wand and they could wish for three things that could make a change in the savings for their clients / community. And it could be anything from policy to programmatic to just like small changes to big changes. And we asked all the participants to come back with their ideas. Lourdes and Kadira, do you guys want to share your three wand wishes, or ones that you remember somebody in your roundtable say?
Yes, so I think I remember a really good one from the first roundtable where someone had mentioned converting their debt into savings and having like one account of their debt like switched into complete savings immediately with the snap of like a finger. So I thought that was really cool. So if someone has, a student loan debt for $10,000 and they were magically able to change that into savings today, that would be awesome. So I would definitely agree with that because that would be amazing.
Awesome. What about you, Lourdes? Is there anyone that you remember having or one that you remember hearing about?
I would probably say, out of everything that I wish, which is a lot, I think that I would probably do student loan forgiveness. I think it's one of the biggest problems in America, and I think that people pursuing an education should not have to have, this incredible burden. As we know, students nowadays, or young adults nowadays, after they graduate, they postpone marriage, having kids, buying a home because they have this huge debt, and I think it's sad, to have that burden. And so student loan forgiveness would be one thing for me. And also, I would like to have more innovation in the field. And that goes even for us service providers. I think that I will hope that in the future we can be more creative and have more innovation in our respective fields, not just with the financial sector, but also as service providers. And how do we deliver these services, and how do we make them relatable to our communities? Our communities don't want to hear about APRs and percentages, and when they're like 2 to 3 jobs and they're tired and they go to a financial education class and we're telling them like the APRs plus this minus that. And we have to be able to relate to our clients and really talk to them about how do you pay your bills on time, how do you get on track to get to buy a home, how do you how are you planning for savings. And so those are things that people relate to. And so the more we make this an everyday thing, an everyday language that we use, I think the more people will be drawn to it. So being innovators in the field, I think, is something that I wish, the future is today. We can start today and start innovating rather than just perpetuating the same models and mentalities that are so archaic and people don't feel they connect with that. And then the third one, I think, would be, really looking into designing products without fees for low income. I think that would be a huge way to reach to the unbanked and the underbanked. So there are many that I would like, but those are probably some of the ones that I think that would be creating the foundation, laying the foundation for better outcomes in the future. But I can honestly say asset limit lifts in even cash bails, and looking at the way we penalize people for being poor versus the wealthy that will go out free. So looking into those systems as well is probably something that I would look into it. And housing, I think once people have the biggest expense covered, people will be better off just saving for and maintaining that wealth. So it's just about having the security of having a roof that you can have your family under, and we can ask people to start working on their savings once they have that covered. So there's a lot of wishes I have.
Yeah, same here. I think that you guys both reported out like great stuff. But same here. A lot of wishes I had. Another question for y'all. We've heard a lot about the kind of polar effect that's happening right now with clients, where on the one end you have clients who are unemployment, haven't been able to access benefits, aren't receiving stimulus payment. And then on the other hand, we have clients who are working from home, have received all stimulus payments or maybe unemployment benefits, and are really prosperous during this time. So is this what you guys are seeing in your own clients, in your own communities? Because both of you are from such different areas around the country. Kadira, you're based out of New York City, and Lourdes, you're in Central Texas. Is this what you're seeing showing up in your work?
I'm going to say a mixture of everything. So my clients, I'm pretty much seeing some people who had jobs earning $180,000, and then now their only income is their unemployment. And the max in New York is $504 weekly. So they're going from earning almost over $10,000 a month to only $2,000, and they have expenses over that. And they can't qualify for the stimulus because the year before they made more than what the stimulus allows to get it. So I'm seeing those cases where like they're really drowning in their expenses and they don't know what to do other than to just keep applying for new positions. And then yes, I'm seeing those who are just under the threshold to get the stimulus payment, still working full time, thankfully, and they're just pocketing the income that they're getting plus the stimulus, and they're choosing to pay off their debts. I had one client who I think she saved up $20,000 and just decided to pay off all her credit card debt. So every session we met with her and we literally got on the phone with every creditor and paid off each account until she was at a zero balance. And like Lourdes said, she ended up owing more because of the APR and the interest rate that she didn't understand. So that had to be explained to her. So we had to go back and start paying some more accounts off. So it really seems like a mixture up here in New York City. And there are some of those people who has gotten the stimulus payments, but they're still drowning. They still need help because they started off owing a lot already. So the money was kind of already taken away before they got it. So there's like a mixture of situations. out here. And I think that still our organization is meeting each and every client where they are and helping every single scenario with what we can. We're even giving out COVID cash grants that we raise money for at Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration for those in need. So there's a mixture up here, and like the nonprofits up here, they're really all trying to help each and every specific unique scenario.
Likewise, here in Central Texas, we see often that there are people that, it's a tech hub, almost here in Austin, and we see people with incredible wealth, and for them things have not changed. Probably they have gotten better, but we see others less fortunate that did not qualify for the stimulus. Our immigrant community, struggled every day to pay rent. We met with public officials and trying to, aid the community that really didn't get much. We even, supported campaigns where people that did not need the stimulus, that received it, could donate that. We made an extra giving day, philanthropy day. So usually it's Giving Tuesday. So we move it up to the beginning of the pandemic and said, anyone that has a stimulus and can spare a couple of $100s on donations to the organizations that are doing the first line work, that aiding the community with basic needs. That campaign was successful. We aid a lot of other nonprofits that we're helping the community with their basic needs, but still it remains, the need is out there, and there's no shortage of that. Housing, and we have a stop on evictions, but that can only be for so long, right? And the debt is still there. It's just that it's on hold. So how do we help the community to cover those expenses when they not only do not have a job, now they have bigger expenses because most of them frontline workers have gotten COVID, did not receive any aid, and we're uninsured. Texas is one of the states that is the most uninsured people there is. So, there's a lot of things that we're facing here. But for some, things have not changed. So it's a little bit of both, and we try to, assist our community the best way we can with our financial education. We got some grants from the RISE funds from the city of Austin, and started giving grants to low-income households to stabilize them. And we were very successful in meeting communities of color. It was 99% of people that we aid that were all from communities of color. So we were very proud of that work that we did. And now we're doing the savings matching initiative. And so, I think that it's hard work. It's work that we're doing because, again, the need is extremely great. But at the same time, we are trying to focus on the long-term solutions, because we do believe that the temporary solutions that we're providing is just to get by, but something has to change for the long term, and that's what we're working on. As we're tackling the immediate needs, we're also looking for solutions for the long term, and hopefully we can get the community to a better place of recovery, at least in a few months.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing. And I think this is our last question. What strengths and insights do savings practitioners bring that can inform structural changes? And we can start with whoever.
I think that the insights that savings practitioners bring, I'm guessing that they're talking about service providers or whoever saves, practitioners. And
Yeah,
I think for
writers, I think.
I think that, meeting with clients on a day-to-day basis gives you an insight that most institutions don't have. So I always encourage people when I meet with stakeholders, like from banks or financial institutions or at a government level, senators and representatives that I meet, I think that the value of us service providers is that we know we are in tune, we have boots on the ground in the community. And that's valuable information because we can make all the assumptions we want and create these products. But if we don't have the community's needs in as part of the information and as part of the equation, again, it will always be an empty side of the needs that we don't fulfill. And so everything that we do is community centered, and where do you get those answers? You get them from the community. So I think service providers, savings practitioners are at a particular privileged position to know what the community needs, to know it's not just about this product and this service. For people that said, why is there so many unbanked people? And if we have all these products, because they are not based on community needs. That's why. If you start thinking about and listening truly and engaging with the community as the savings practitioners do, then you will know what they need. They need not to have fees. They need for it to be in Spanish or in some Asian language that they can relate to, that they can understand. They need to be in all these different platforms for them to access. And so I think that that's the value that savings practitioners have, is that they are in tune with the communities. They are the thermometer of the community, and they have boots on the ground. So it's a position of power that they have, that we have, because of we deal with them on a daily basis, and I think there is a lot of value to that.
Yeah, I agree. We are, as savings practitioners, we are like the foot soldiers. And with that in mind, we know what the community needs. And like Lourdes said, there are so many products because they don't really understand what each and every specific unique community needs. I think of it as like, a lot of people are having difficulty with saving because of lack of funds, as we mentioned, because of low wages, as we mentioned, because of benefit issues with programs. But in addition to that, there's also willpower, and there's also things being marketed to lower income communities that will pretty much take their paycheck in one day. And these things are not exactly marketed to higher income people. And so with that in mind, we have the insight to know that there is some type of predatory, materialistic marketing happening in lower income communities, causing people to spend more money than what they have, sometimes causing them to have like a sort of kind of like weakness to consumerism. And because we have that insight, we're providing them not only the financial counseling, but like the mental health counseling that is needed to stop their willpower from like overspending and things of that sort. So we see that and we know that. And I think because we know that, we're able to offer such great services all nationwide. There's so many nonprofits just like mine. Obviously, there's one in Texas, there's one in Chicago. There's like, we know exactly what's going on in the community. So with that in mind, we definitely have the power to put forth something that is going to be successful for savings needs, and that is geared towards the lower income groups, and not something that's just going to buy them again, or not something that they have to buy into and then they'll end up just wasting their money all over again. It'll be something that actually works if we were to like come up with some type of saving solutions, because we actually speak to clients every day.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I think that was a great last question to kind of wrap up our conversation. We talked so much today about so many great ideas, things that we've heard from the Savings Roundtable, things that we've been thinking about ourselves, what we've learned from lessons from COVID. And I just want to thank you both for joining us. You guys are great. This is why we brought you guys both onto today's webinar, because we loved what you had to say at the roundtables, and we felt like the audience would really benefit from hearing from two very strong, powerful women in our field. So thank you guys for joining us today. As we move forward with next steps and wrap up, just a reminder to visit our advocacy center. Please complete the survey at the end of the webinar, sign up for other networks and campaigns, And as always, let us know your suggestions for future calls, topics. Plug into the Prosperity Now community. You can take action at the Prosperity Now Advocacy Center, where you can contact your representatives. Thank you all for joining us on today's webinar. This is the last one in our series. Please take our post-webinar survey, and we hope to see you again on our next webinar. Be well, stay safe, and be sure to keep your distance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.